Good morning, good evening, good afternoon, depending on where you are, and welcome to everybody listening to us live and everybody listening to us afterwards. I'm very pleased to welcome you to this FIP event organized by the FIP Hospital Pharmacy Section, part of the Board of Pharmaceutical Practice. The event is titled Advanced and Specialist Pharmacist Development for Hospital Pharmacists. We're really pleased to have you here today. My name is Lena Bader. I'm the FIP lead for Workforce Transformation and Development, and I'm honored to be moderating this event and introducing you to our speakers and later hosting and coordinating the discussion with you all. Just some housekeeping announcement as we still welcome in some more attendance, and a reminder for those who are listening to or joining the first FIP event. This event or webinar is being recorded, of course, and live streamed via YouTube. You can access the recording afterwards. The recording will also be available on our website, www.events.fip.org. You may, and we so encourage this, ask questions using the question box provided. You can see the Q&A chat box. Please use that to send in your questions. We will pick them up throughout the event. And you are more than welcome to provide feedback about this event and other future ones to webinars@fip.org. Finally, as a reminder, if you aren't already, please consider becoming a member of FIP. You can visit the URL you can see on screen to explore all the benefits of FIP individual membership. Thank you in advance for considering that. Again, I'm very pleased to be hosting the event today. We have a panel of 3 speakers: Kirsty Galbraith from Australia, Josep Gayu from Spain, and Andras Cholet from Hungary. I'll be introducing them each at a time. Very, very excited. Next slide, please. Just as a reminder, learning objectives of today, really we want together with you all to come out of today's event having an increased awareness of the competencies required of a hospital pharmacist in general, but also understand the global initiatives, especially those by FIP and around the world, that are in progression and recognition pathways that are available for advanced practice and specialization, and how those can be relevant for hospital pharmacy. We want to also be able to identify the resources available for use of the FIP Hospital Pharmacy Section Basel Statements in the hospital pharmacy advanced practice area, and together also hopefully be able to identify new competencies the hospital pharmacists will need in the future and ones we need to consider as we develop their competencies. Next slide, please. Today's program, we'll do a quick welcome introduction. That's me doing that now. We will go through the issue of increased awareness of competencies required, understanding global initiatives by Kirsty, and then finally by Andras, we will go through the FIP Basel Statements. We will also have some time for the Q&A discussion, hence we really recommend you sending your questions through the Q&A box. We will pick them up then, and then we'll wrap up and conclude before close of session. I'm very pleased to get started and introduce and welcome our first speaker, Dr. Andras Cholet. Dr. Andras Cholet is the Chief Pharmacist at the Peter V Hospital National Institute of Traumatology and a guest lecturer and lead developer of the Hospital Pharmacy Specialisation program at Semmelweis University in Budapest, Hungary. He joined the board of the European Association of Hospital Pharmacists in 2014 and began his 3-year term as its president recently in June 2021. Andras, welcome to this event. We're really pleased to have you with us today. The floor is yours, Andras.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Lena, for the kind introduction. Hello, everyone. It's really an honor to be invited to this really great event, and I'm always delighted to be a part of international endeavors like this. And a huge welcome to you all in the audience from every corner of the world. And well, all of you might know, I think, that what our association EAHP stands for. Just a quick recap, EAHP represents and develops the hospital pharmacy profession within the broader European region, with 3 main areas in our focus being education, mostly the topic of today's speech, Also, we have numerous professional and scientific projects, and our policy efforts are also amongst our top priorities, mostly on the EU and the EU institutional levels. Next slide, please. Today, I'm going to talk about a little bit how hospital pharmacy is changing, how those roles are being taken up by the advancement and specialization projects, and how all that could be aligned with the European statements of hospital pharmacy and also the FIP Basel Statements, of course. In that manner, EAHP really has a long track record of fostering educational changes that can help the advancement of the profession, but also the mutual recognition of hospital pharmacy specialization projects that exist in multiple countries in the EU region. And if I may have the next slide, please. And that's why we have decided that we have to release a new position paper from our side on hospital pharmacy specialization, because we felt the need that we have to amalgamate this type of evolution, all our policy efforts, meaning the statements, all the new roles we are experiencing on the European field that hospital pharmacists are taking up, and also the mutual recognition area, meaning the common training framework from the European institutions. All those three factors had to all be weighed in into one single position paper. Next slide, please. We find it vital that advancement of the profession to be recognized on high levels. And for that, you could think of advancement and the term specialization as a two-dimensional coordinate system in which specialization means education probably, and advancement is how the individual and the pharmacy profession itself is evolving and gaining expertise and experience in certain subspecialties in a region, in a hospital, in an individual's life, or even on larger scale in different health systems. That's why we set out to have three main objectives for our policy agendas in this regard, and also within our position paper. First and foremost being the advancement of the specialization itself, enhancement of the profession, so that's the other set of coordinates in that system. And also we are very keen on, and we are very in knowledge of and tiny bit concerned about how we can future-proof the hospital pharmacy profession as such. If we may have the next slide, please. You will see that from the advancement point of view, most of our efforts are going in the direction of hospital pharmacy specialization, specialization programs existing on similarly high, interchangeable and mutually recognizable level on the whole EU, in the whole EU region. And for that, we have opened the gates, so to say, to the European Professional Qualifications Directive to set up a common training framework, a legislative tool, basically, to foster this automatic recognition of different specialization programs within EU countries. But for that, we have to put out a call both towards the European Commission, but also to the member states and our member associations to enable that change to become a reality. And for that, we need to have sort of a compass on which way to proceed. And that we can see on the next slide. EAHP has developed a competency framework in strong agreement with its members on multiple dimensions in which hospital pharmacy specialization programs should exist. And it's a rather elaborate document. If you are interested, please do visit the website. You can see on the slide here. But in a nutshell, this competency framework includes 4 clusters: patient care, medicines and their medicines use and the related competencies, management areas, and also professional competencies. And that compass serves as a guidance towards all of our members and also to the legislation to create a homogeneous enough set of rules and set of competencies to enable that mutual recognition to take place if a specialization program meets all those criteria. Let's move on, please. But then again, training and specialization is not enough in itself. So it's really vital to have those subspecialties existing, but that has to be filled in with the practice itself. And that exactly is what the evolution of the traditional hospital pharmacy roles encompass. We see that the profession is really versatile throughout Europe, but we also see, and to our real gladness, and we are really delighted to see that clinical pharmacy engagement for hospital pharmacists is gaining momentum throughout the continent. Hospital pharmacists appear on wards. Clinical pharmacy services are really gaining pace, and also related subspecialties also exist in the areas of pediatric pharmacy, toxicology, even pharmacoeconomics or pharmacovigilance. And it is important that member states recognize these changing roles, and by member states I mean both governments, healthcare professionals, complete health systems, but also the society. And we have to ask ourselves the question, what if they do not recognize these changing roles? That is a rather grim future, I would say, to the profession, since all the changes within our environment, professionally, I mean, is really pushing our profession in previously non-explored areas. And I am hugely convinced that future-proofing the profession is key, and to be able to future-proof, we need those new roles being taken up. But we also have to ask ourselves a question and be ready for the answer, that what if the member states do recognize this? And what if the need suddenly arises for hospital pharmacists to populate all the wards, all the health systems, be present in primary care settings with general practice communities? And that, again, is a question we have to be ready for. And if we move on to the next slide, we can see that this future-proofing, also from the side of EAHP, our association, is hugely focusing on 2 issues. One of them is the capacity problems or the workforce deficiencies we are seeing. What we experience throughout multiple EU countries is that pharmacy schools, universities simply do not work at their maximum capacities to have enough graduates to fill in all those new roles if they become vacant or if they just pop up. And that lack of graduates or trained pharmacists could really be an issue if we want to answer all those demands that are probably popping up on our horizon. And I think that it is all of our duties, both as professional organizations and national organizations, to represent this type of activities and this type of approach to even member states and all the policymakers and legislative bodies, that investing in a more suited workforce planning for the hospital pharmacy profession is vital. And what it all boils down to is that it is our duty as pharmacy organizations to future-proof our profession. And I am hugely convinced that amongst ourselves, there is a palpable consensus on what these new roles are and how they could be solidified on a broader scale. But when we take a look at those on the next slide, we see that the end point of all these advancements, all these specializations, is the patient itself. And from the patient's point of view, what they could experience as an added bonus is a safe and seamless transition of care wherever they are within health systems, both the primary or the secondary levels, ideally, no matter which member state they are in. And that means an increased engagement from the hospital pharmacy profession. That means a hugely improved collaboration between healthcare professionals and carers. And that is closely linked to the workforce issues that I've just highlighted previously. So it is our belief that we have to further promote this uptake of multi-professional engagement of the pharmacy profession, medical professions, nursing professions, and the patients, so that the overall experience from the patients with the health systems is a less demanding and much more reassuring one. And it is a good question if that needs a bottom-up or a top-down approach. I would say both. Because in order to implement all those changes and to solidify new roles, we need the field experience. We need that evidence rooting in the real world, rooting in real environments, so that the metrics from those experiences could be used from the policymakers' point of view to enable that top-down pull to aid the bottom-up push if we want to really foster this evolution of our profession. And that also embodies in the interface pharmacy model, where community and hospital pharmacy regions or areas just align and touch each other. And that would be the very end point of this seamless transition of care, where both information about a patient's medication, both the pharmaceutical care information and all the pharmacy-related activities just follow the patient no matter where they are within their health systems. My last slide is a mere thank you. I'm really grateful again for FIP for having me here. And I'm really grateful to all the audience for listening. And if there are any questions, I'd be more than happy to answer. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you very much, Andres, for that really important presentation. And I suppose we had an exploration of the regional aspect of hospital pharmacy development within Europe. And I know we'll have a discussion on how that, can translate globally and then translate back in nationally downwards. We're going to global view, I think, now a little bit more, and we'll come back to a discussion with you, Andres. Thanks again. And we move on to Professor Kirsty Galbraith. Kirsty's area of expert professional practice is in practitioner development. She is responsible for postgraduate education in the pharmacy faculty of Monash University and works closely with the profession to advance practice locally, nationally, and internationally. She works across the spectrum of undergraduates, intern, foundation level pharmacists, and more advanced practitioner. Kirsty is also an associate director at the FIP Workforce Development Hub and global lead for development goal number 4, advanced and specialist practice. Kirsty, welcome.
Thank you, Lena. And thank you to Andres for doing such a lovely job of setting the scene and giving me a platform to start my talk on. Really focusing on future-proofing our profession and taking a really future-gazing look about where the profession of hospital pharmacy is going. So I thought that was a lovely way to start, and I hope I can build on this story that we're starting to tell about hospital pharmacy and where we are now and where we might be going in the future. So a big thanks for the opportunity to speak to you today on the topic of understanding global initiatives in progression and recognition pathways for advanced practice and specialisation. Lena's told you about some of the hats I wear, and I'll be talking today from two perspectives. Firstly, with my global FIP hat on, sharing some information about a global advanced development framework that we've worked on. And secondly, from a Monash University perspective, where I'll share some local information about our postgraduate coursework programs for career advancement. For both of these topics, I'll focus mainly on hospital pharmacy, although this information can be applied to any healthcare setting. And to follow up on that, to give you some brief background about the scene where I work in Australia, we don't call hospital pharmacy specialty practice. Our graduates meet national competency standards to provide patient care in any setting. And I know that's different for many of you, but I'll try and explain today how the tools and pathways I present can be used regardless of whatever definition you have for specialty practice. So I'll get the first slide, please. So this is a busy slide with some of the work that FIP has done, which is relevant to the talk today. So FIP has recognised the importance of advanced practice and specialisation in its goal to support universal healthcare. In Nanjing in 2016, 13 workforce development goals were agreed, and this followed many years of project work and dissemination of technical reports leading up to that point. And you'll probably be aware that those 13 workforce development goals have now grown to 21 global development goals, and you can see those on the slide here. And they cover not just workforce and education, but they also bring in the science and practice arms of our profession. So all arms of our professional practice is represented in these global development goals. And so in addition to agreeing on these 21 goals, each of the goals has defined factors for success in being able to progress meeting those goals. And DG4, as you can see here, focuses on advanced and specialist development. And for success in DG4, it's noted that countries, territories and member organisations should have education and training infrastructures in place for the recognised advancement of the pharmaceutical workforce as a basis for enhancing patient care and health system deliverables. But in addition, there needs to be a common understanding of terminology and ideally a professional recognition program in place across the workforce. I'm going to talk to you about a few of those initiatives today. Recently, work that FIP has done that I've been involved with has largely focused on the development of a global advanced development framework to assist in progressing this initiative globally. I'll have the next slide, please. So I mentioned the importance of having agreed definitions, and this slide is going to unpick that a little bit. So as I said, work related to this initiative has been going on for quite some time. And the work relating to the Global Advanced Development Framework really started with the publication of a 2015 Advanced Practice and Specialisation in Pharmacy Global Report, and that's pictured here on the left of the slide. This initial report contained data on 48 nations, and it described initiatives relating to advancement and specialisation. We now have initial data, and the data set has been expanded to include 88 nations, which further adds to our understanding of factors associated with successful initiatives associated with workforce advancement. Countries such as Australia and the UK already have established frameworks to recognise more advanced practice. And using the data now on record from the 88 countries, the International Pharmaceutical Federation has suggested that language and common understanding are challenges that are limiting workforce advancement worldwide. So in our report, we used a definition which we adapted from Australia, and that definition is advanced practice is practice that is so significantly different from that achieved at initial registration that it warrants further professional recognition. It's important to note, though, that there's not really any global agreement on what the terminology advanced practice actually means. And so FIP will soon be commencing work on a global glossary in an attempt to overcome some of these problems. Versions of the diagram on the right-hand side of the slide are used commonly to explain the concepts of advancement, which relate to performance, and specialisation, which relate to focus. Graphics such as this can assist in global understanding of this terminology. So for me, the most critical part of this diagram is that it demonstrates a pharmacist can be a specialist without being advanced. So our example in Australia might be a new graduate pharmacist working in cardiology, but pharmacists can also be advanced without being specialised. And again, in my setting, a very strong example of an advanced general medicine pharmacist. So again, the terminology is so important to understand whether we're talking about advancement or specialisation. The initial report demonstrated a clear need for tools and resources to assist countries, member organisations and individuals to describe their performance and to plan their development towards more advanced practice to meet these needs. And so, for example, a range of competency standards are available to support practice advancement. And it was lovely to see Andres talk about the European competency standards for hospital pharmacists that are now available. I'll have the next slide, please. And this slide demonstrates some of the work that was done in the development and validation of the Global Advanced Development Framework, which I've mentioned. So we developed this in response to the need for a global tool to recognise and encourage advanced practice and specialisation. Again, we started this work in 2015, but the basis of the work even predates that. And the Global Advanced Development Framework has its origins in the Advanced to Consultant Level Framework, shown on the far left of this slide, which was developed by the Competency Development and Evaluation Group in the UK. The ACLF was developed using robust methodology and has similar domains and stages of development to our GADF. It has been tested, validated and implemented globally and has continued to evolve to encompass a range of specialties and sectors. Examples of the ACLF being adopted and adapted can be seen in countries such as Australia, with the pictured and Advanced Pharmacy Practice Framework, and the UK with their Advanced Pharmacy Framework. Using a similar adopt-adapt approach, the ACLF was adapted for context, language and relevance for a generalised global audience, and concurrently a translation process in Indonesian was conducted, along with a serial modified Delphi international reference group. Subsequent field testing provided further evidence of the generalisability of the framework as a mapping and development tool, and additional broad input from across FIP resulted in so-called version 0 of the GADF, which was released at FIP Congress in Abu Dhabi in 2019. It was decided to release the tool for general use at that time to seek feedback to further inform iterations, rather than delay release for further pilot testing and feedback. However, a further round of engagement with members was undertaken, and with incorporation of that feedback, official version 1 of the FIP Global Advanced Development Framework Handbook was released in 2020. In addition to the framework itself, this handbook contains information about the development process, and most importantly, a number of case studies, exemplars for implementation and work in progress. So if you're interested to see how other member countries are using the GADF and describing advanced and specialist practice in their countries, I'd encourage you to have a read of the handbook and in particular the case studies. Next slide, please. So what is the Global Advanced Development Framework? It's a validated tool to support the professional development and recognition of the pharmacy workforce wherever they work. So for instance, in hospital pharmacy. Its generic content, however, allows all areas of practice to individualise it for broad use. It builds from other development goals, tools and resources from FIP, including the Global Competency Framework, which is targeted at foundation and early career pharmacists. The GADF seamlessly picks up from those early years and has a focus on advancement and specialisation. With this pathway, pharmacy practitioners, including educators and pharmaceutical scientists, have a development pathway for their entire career, incorporating changes in sector, career breaks, etc. The GADF is structured as a matrix with 6 clusters of competency as listed on the slide, 34 individual competencies, and 3 stages of advancement. Each competency has detailed descriptors at the 3 levels to enable users to clearly see developmental opportunities and areas for recognition. So while the clusters and competencies are generic enough to be used in any setting, they map closely to the Basel Statements and describe many activities considered important to hospital pharmacist advancement. Next slide, please. So how might this work in practice? And to give you an example of how this works in Australia, and in particular in our hospital pharmacy setting. So in Australia, we have a single set of competencies which cover the entire career progression of a pharmacist, including a pharmacist working in hospital. These competencies define pharmacists' scope of practice, and for some competencies have descriptors from general or entry to profession right through to the most advanced practice pharmacist. So these descriptors allow practitioners to map their learning, development, and career advancement. In Australia, hospital pharmacists' career development is informed by a number of factors, including role descriptions, and in a number of our hospitals, those role descriptions are very closely mapped to the advancing practice competencies. Postgraduate qualifications and work experience are also important in career development. And more and more in recent times, this also incorporates residency training, which is specific to the hospital sector in Australia. We have previously had a national credentialing system in place to recognise practitioners who are more advanced. However, this system is currently paused while under review. However, the process uses our version of a global advanced development framework to underpin that credentialing process. The next slide, please. So bringing this even more locally and putting my Monash hat on, one of my roles at Monash is to run the postgraduate coursework degrees. So this is an example of what a hospital pharmacist pathway might look like in terms of postgraduate coursework, which sits alongside a pharmacist as they're practicing in hospital. So at entry to profession, all pharmacists in Australia, after they graduate from university, must undertake a year of supervised practice, which is called internship. So internship is mandatory in Australia to become a registered pharmacist. Part of undertaking internship, in addition to supervised practice hours, is the requirement to undertake an accredited intern training program. In my state and through Monash University, all hospital interns and many community interns, community pharmacy interns, undertake an intern foundation program alongside their intern training program. And this intern foundation program has academic credit related to work integrated learning. So students are performing clinical pharmacy tasks as part of their normal workday and receiving structured feedback from their pharmacist preceptors and receiving academic credit for it towards either a graduate certificate or a Master of Pharmacy. Many hospital pharmacists, after they're fully registered, then go on to complete further academic study, and the program that we run is a Master of Clinical Pharmacy. Some pharmacists choose a Master of Public Health or other degrees, but the Master of Clinical Pharmacy is the program that we run at Monash. Alongside that, some hospital pharmacists, as I mentioned, also undertake residency, and the residency programs are offered by our Society of Hospital Pharmacists of Australia. And more commonly, hospital pharmacists are undertaking their residency alongside their postgraduate coursework qualification. So they achieve an academic qualification in addition to their structured workplace learning. So the Master of Clinical Pharmacy assists pharmacists to further advance their practice. And at the end of their degree, their capstone unit is submission of a portfolio which is mapped to the advancing practice competencies. So they have a chance to wrap up their postgraduate coursework by describing their advancement in an electronic portfolio and the impact of their contribution to the profession as a hospital pharmacist. And I'll take the next slide. I think that's my last slide. Thank you very much for listening. I'd love you to tweet about what you heard and what you saw, and I'd be very happy to take your questions as well. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Kirsty, for that showcase of FIP's work, but also how you are leading that work nationally and institutionally in Monash University. I know we'll be speaking about that soon, and I'm very familiar with the handbook, so I have some questions for you, but we'll take those later. I'll just move on to Joseph. Next, Joseph Guillou is the Director of Pharmacy and Medicines at the Consortium of Health and Social Care of Catalonia, and Adjunct Lecturer of Clinical Pharmacy and Pharmacotherapy at the Faculty of Pharmacy and Food Sciences of the University of Barcelona, Spain. He is currently the Secretary of the Catalan Society of Clinical Pharmacy and Vice President for the Euro region of the Hospital Pharmacy section of the International Pharmaceutical Federation, FIP. Joseph, welcome. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Lina, for your kind introduction. I'm also going to speak with two hats, one from the Hospital Pharmacy section and the other from the local perspective of Spain, with our experience in the advancement of the hospital pharmacy profession. My presentation today is going to focus on the FIP Basel Statements as a tool to assess and advance the hospital pharmacy practice worldwide. How it started, the Basel Statements were elaborated in 2008 during a global conference on the future of hospital pharmacy, which took place in Basel prior to the FIP Congress. A few years after, they were reviewed and revisited and updated in 2014 during the FIP World Congress in Bangkok, in Thailand. And now the FIP Hospital Pharmacy section is already working to review all these statements, to update them if possible or if needed. And probably in the future Congress in Brisbane, it will be the new version of the Basel Statements. The Basel Statements are work from a global consensus, so they have a global perspective. Maybe if you have available regional statements like the EAHP statements, it will fit more to you, but if not, they're a tool can be applied from a global perspective to any hospital pharmacy in the world. They are divided in different categories. They're the overarching statements, and then they are focused in procurement, in influence of prescribing, in preparation and delivery, administration, monitoring of medicines use, and human resources training and development. These statements are available at the FIP website. There's no login, no password required, and there are also a few translations available if needed to their local languages. Apart from the statements, in the FIP website, you have also available some publications that related to the FIP Basel Statements, experiences people that have worked with these tools and how to improve their practice. So they are also available to complement these statements. Next slide, please. Which are the objectives of the Basel Statements? To build a shared vision among hospital pharmacy leaders about how the future of hospital pharmacy practice will be. So they are aspirational goals. Maybe you will not reach all the statements, but from these global perspectives, this is considered that a good opportunity to work to reach these goals. So this allows to identify the strategic goals, to identify the strategy from your hospital pharmacy practice, your hospital pharmacy at your hospital, or the hospital pharmacies organizations in your country to reach this advancement of practice. So they identify these relevant needs and they identify the opportunities for global cooperation to allow this every country to set the goals for hospital pharmacy. So they are consensus statements. Maybe all of them, they will not be relevant for you, but in a global perspective, they are the best to prioritize this practice and offer a guidance on development tools, timelines, strategies for achieving these advancements in practice. So in conclusion, there are a roadmap for hospital pharmacy practice and global level that can be applied to local level to each of our hospital pharmacies. These are the 6 topic areas. There are 65 statements in total, and for the practice or the advancement of the practice, all of them are relevant because the prescribing competences of pharmacists or the influence of prescribing in the healthcare system of hospital pharmacies are a goal then to develop these competences, these skills, but they also identified how human resources or training or hospital pharmacies will be or should be in the future. Next slide, please. Then, apart from the Basel statements, there is also available free online tool, Basel statement self-assessment tool. You can create your own user to this website and then take your self-assessment of your hospital pharmacy. There are 4 sections. First, you can introduce your demographic information, then the pharmacist involvement, the preparation and delivery, and then also to create your own action plan to prioritize which are the works, which are the goals you want to achieve in the near future. So in this assessment summary, as you can create your user and you can save your data or your state of the practice at that moment, you can retake this self-assessment tool in the future and see how you can progress, how you have progressed, and to figure or to set your plans or the areas you will focus to advance your practice in some of the statements, so you can check this progress, visualize how it's going, and prepare the strategies of your hospital pharmacies to work in the advancement of the hospital pharmacy practice in your setting. And the Basel statements are these aspirational goals, the future of hospital pharmacy, but the future is evolving so quickly. So it's difficult to see how the future will be, and even for the hospital pharmacy practice at the global level. Probably these Basel statements will have to be reviewed to introduce the last changes in the hospital practice around the world. Probably the COVID-19 pandemic will have also an imprint in our practice, and we have to introduce aspects like the emergency and pandemics management. But the future pandemics of our societies at the global level are more related to the aging of the population, so the monitoring and to the participation of the hospital pharmacy practice in the management of chronic diseases. Apart from that, the hospitals are evolving and will evolve in the future. And hospital pharmacists can work and can be leaders of this transformation of hospitals and to collaborate in building this hospital of the future. As that has been commented previously, the patient-centered care will be the focus or practice, but also the introduction of the new technologies from the hospital pharmacy, the hospital practice experience, but also from the experience of the patients, which are more technologically evolved every day. So one of the challenges of the future of hospital pharmacy practice will be to manage this digital patient experience through artificial intelligence, for example. So competencies in digital health will be needed, and will be complemented and lifelong learning implemented, and also how introduce these new tools like artificial intelligence, these blockchain technologies in our hospital pharmacy practice. During the last decades, technology has been introduced in hospital pharmacies, depending on the region. But dispensing cabinets are present in almost every continent, maybe not in almost every country. But the efficiency of hospital pharmacy practice is one of the threads that have been remembered in our practice. These operational efficiencies, they're very related to management of shortages and the management of the new needs of patients will mean that hospital pharmacies will have to deal with that. The hospital of the future, maybe this is one thing that will be rethinked after the pandemic, but is a hospital that is more integrated with the community. So hospital pharmacies then will have to integrate the care beyond the hospital facilities. One thing that we are experimenting now is that hospital pharmacies have to be more integrated with the hospital home care units for the administration of drugs like antibiotics at the patient's homes, but also new challenges like to administrate some chemotherapies at patients' homes. Patients' homes, or depending on the patients and the society, more integrated, like for example, with nursing homes or retirement homes. The new professional roles that will be introduced in hospitals will also be a challenge for hospital pharmacists, because we have to interact with these new professionals, but we are needed also to integrate and to incorporate in our competences some of these new roles, like the role of health coaches for patients, the genetic counselors, and the medical engineers that are very related to all these introduction of high specialized technology at hospitals, for example, for surgeries, but also for the hospital pharmacies, like robots for compounding of chemotherapies, or also 3D printing drugs in hospital pharmacies, which mean high technologies that are present in the hospital pharmacies and need new competencies for hospital pharmacies, but also to integrate at last these new professionals in the hospital pharmacy, like biomedical engineers. These new challenges from precision medicine, pharmacogenetics, pharmacogenomics into the practice means that new competencies for these hospital pharmacies and the introduction of different kind of drugs to practice, like advanced therapy medical products, genetic engineering, the use of viruses, the use of CAR-T cell therapy in practice means hospital pharmacies will have to deal with a different kind of drugs, absolutely different to traditional drugs or chemical synthesis drugs, and to acquire these new competences with the dealing and management and also the research of these drugs, and also to specialize in these precision medicine and new technologies drugs. After the pandemic, we have seen an increasing role of the use of virtual platforms, also for pharmaceutical care, also for hospital pharmacies, that we are communicating now with patients through virtual platforms and providing this pharmaceutical care through these virtual platforms. Maybe this is not new, it was before the pandemic, but the pandemic has created the opportunity to transform the healthcare environment, and for sure this virtual pharmaceutical care, the home delivery of the drugs, the integration and the tight collaboration with community pharmacies to provide this virtual pharmaceutical care from hospital pharmacies to patients, it has been arrived and will be here after the pandemic. And the hospital pharmacies with this hospital that it's putting these walls off and being more liquid means that hospital pharmacies will have to integrate and also to deliver primary healthcare. And this is one of the examples that we are thinking about the delivery of primary healthcare of hospital pharmacies in my local level in Spain. Next slide, please. How the hospital pharmacy specialty works in Spain is after two periods of training. First, the graduate in pharmacy, it's a 5 years university degree and qualifies to practice as a pharmacist. In the graduate of pharmacies, as it says a EU directive, it is an internship period of 6 months. And this allows pharmacists to practice as a community pharmacist. But to practice as a hospital pharmacy is needed a 4-year program. It's a residency program. It's at hospital, the same as medical doctors do for their specialties, and this is granted by the Ministry of Health. This degree, the hospital pharmacy specialty degree, is required to practice as a hospital pharmacy. There is not a formal recognition for specialty areas of practice in hospital pharmacy. Pharmacists who work in just a very focused area, they acquire their knowledge and their skills after practice, but most of them after that they take the Board of Pharmacy Specialty Certification, which is the most extended in Spain, and in these areas of specialty practice, oncology, pediatrics, critical care, geriatrics, and or mental health. There's not a formal recognition, but this is widely used in Spain. And what is happening now is this reflection and this debate by the Ministry of Health to provide these new competencies for hospital pharmacy. And the animation, please. The hospital pharmacy specialty will evolve to hospital pharmacy and primary care pharmacy specialty. 4 years broader scope of practice that introduce the practice in hospital, but also in primary care centers to provide this seamless of care patients through the healthcare system, and also to have tight collaboration with community pharmacists, but with these hospital pharmacists that are not only focused in the hospital, but they are also providing care through all the healthcare system. And next slide, please. And that's my last slide. Thank you all for listening, and I'm more than happy to answer your questions.
Thank you very much for that, Joseph. And we are now going to do a short discussion with our panelists. So if I might ask our speakers to all go on camera. I do have a really good big question from the chat box, but I think I'll ask a variation of it to each one of our speakers, and then maybe together we can see what the answer would be. So Johannes sent a question to say, is it possible to make, or I guess standardize, education and competencies for pharmacists around the world so they could work anywhere they want? So maybe I'll start with Kirsty. Kirsty, do we need to do that? I know. My question to you, and it's a bit cheeky, is do we need to do that? Is that the aim here? And what do you think of that?
Thanks, Lena. It's really not the aim here. And FIP's approach would be that education and practice should be needs-based. So what we need for our population in Australia is different from the population in Europe and Africa and America, etc. And so we would never suggest that everything should be the same. What we would suggest is, or what we've tried to do, is make tools and resources available that are generic enough that you can localize to your own needs, rather than trying to mandate what practice should be like by telling you what the competencies are in minute detail and how to teach it. So that's generally FIP's sort of mantra, is about making it needs-based. But we think that having tools and resources available that you can personalise and individualise either to yourself or your workplace or your country or your region is more helpful than trying to make practice standardised globally.
Thank you, Kirsty. Anders, can I ask you, what have you learned from the European experience? With the framework, for example, how are you trying to balance that needs-based implementation versus trying to harmonize a little bit and maybe facilitate the uptake of such competencies? Can you tell us a little bit more about that?
Yes, thank you. Well, as many things in this regard, Europe and our member countries are a little bit diverse, and there are multiple historical backgrounds, multiple cultural backgrounds within the healthcare systems really do make it more of a challenge to come to a conclusion. And of course, in full agreement with Kirsty, I also do think that a one-size-fits-all solution is not possible in this regard. But if we want to come to a point where hospital pharmacy specializations, and let them be called PharmD programs or whatever that equivalent, is mutually recognized within EU countries, and that would be very much in line with the ethos of the European Union and the free movement of labor. For that, the core competencies should be there, and the core competencies should be the same, at the same level, at the same depth, so that the basis is there for everyone. And just like with the graduate pharmacy degree, we see that it is mutually recognized within the EU. But if you move between countries, there are certain elements that have to be learned by the individual, have to be tailored to that culture, that health system, that country. So that's probably our aim there as well. And for facilitating, I really am convinced that it has to be a two-pronged approach. Just like I tried to highlight in my presentation, it has to be pushed by the pharmacists themselves and creating the good examples, the good practices that can be shown and measured. And then again, based on those real-world evidences, policymakers and even legislative bodies could then act as a pulling force from the legislation side. And ideally, those two combined could make a perfect push-pull solution, and that would be the most ideal driving force. But no one-size-fits-all solution is viable. I fully agree with that.
Thank you, Anders. That's really helpful. And maybe going to Joseph, I would like to know, maybe confirm to our attendants, what is the hospital pharmacy section take on this? In terms of the Basel statements have been developed again, how do we balance the implementation versus standardization? Is that what we want? And maybe it's really the same question, but from a hospital pharmacy point of view.
Yeah, probably the one size does not fill all, but from the hospital pharmacy section, and when you interact with our international colleagues, you see that most of the problems are the same around the world for hospital pharmacies. So Basel statements can be a tool to work in that direction and to provide these useful tools for hospital pharmacies practice to advance in the direction of the advance of practice. Different countries are at different levels, and they have to do different process. And also, there is an important, relevant thing that different healthcare systems also provide different regulations and different capacities and responsibilities for hospital pharmacies. But as hospital pharmacists, and from the FIP hospital pharmacy section perspective, we also promote for the advancement of hospital pharmacy practice. We think that hospital pharmacies, we do not provide all the care we could provide or the capacities we have, and so we can advance with this providing of care and with this broader spectrum for the benefit of the patients.
Thank you for that, Joseph. I'm going to go back to Kirsty. Kirsty, we do have a question about what can we do in undergraduate education to support the development of specialization later on? You touched on this with examples from Monash, but it would be great to hear back from you.
Yeah. Look, in Australia, as I said, we graduate generalists, pharmacists who meet entry-level competencies who can practice anywhere. So we don't actually push too hard on specialisation in our undergraduate program. What we try and do is expose our students to as many different career paths and inspirational pharmacists doing interesting things without encouraging them to go down that path too soon. But we try and get them exposure until they find something that they think, oh, really, that's what I want to do when I leave here. And we try and talk to them about what those career paths might look like, because all of our pharmacists in Australia have got a different journey, how they got to where they're at. And so having our students be able to hear those stories and see how their inspirational role models got to where they are, that's the really powerful thing for us as undergraduates, instead of promoting a particular pathway. We've got a particular, there's some competition with our graduates as to where they do their internship and where they end up practicing. And it comes and goes. At the moment, it's very pro-hospital. There's a great career path. It's seen as highly satisfying, and a lot of our graduates want to go into hospital pharmacy. But not everyone can do that. And so our job is really to balance that out and to make sure our students know what are the opportunities available to them when they leave university, and what pathways might they follow to get there. And also, if they've gone down a certain path and they change their mind, how might they go down a different path? So it's about that adaptability that we're teaching them as well. Hope that helps.
That does help. Thank you, Kirsty. And I'll go back to Anders and ask him again about the plans in Europe. Are there plans to engage with universities when it comes to the hospital pharmacy framework and such work?
By all means, so I think it, not that we want to, but we really cannot be avoided. We really are aware of the situation that is that I already highlighted, that if we really are to experience that change in the roles of hospital pharmacists, then we really have to be ready in terms of workforce planning for that. And that is basically unattainable without the pharmacy schools or universities' participation. And luckily, we are in close collaboration with the European Association of Pharmacy Faculties, which really is a helpful connection to all pharmacy schools and pharmacy undergraduate and graduate programs within our reach. So that is a must, yes. And also the undergraduate programs have to be prepared for these type of changes, and that means a rather deep restructuring sometimes within the curricula. But that's a rather long discussion to have today, but we really see the need to change and the shift in the the focus, shift in the focuses of the undergraduate programs from the chemistry side to the medical and patient-centered side.
Thank you, Andras. And last but not least, we do have another question from Mohammed coming in, and I suppose it does link to the standardization discussion, so we've already answered that. But is FIP carrying out any capacity building for hospital pharmacists to help standardize hospital practice? Again, we will avoid the standardization word, but maybe going to Joseph and relabeling that as development. Can you tell us more about what hospital pharmacy section has plans, projects to develop more tools to support the development of this area?
Well, one of the benefits of the tool is to assess, and we have some pilots of the progress of the advancement. Just firstly to assess, and then to plan an action plan and a strategy for the advancement of practice. And from the hospital pharmacy section, we have used the Basel statements to assess and to reshape and to shape an action plan for the hospital pharmacies in different settings. For example, you can see in the literature in the website experience in Namibia, and another one that is coming in Pakistan. So these statements allow to promote and to develop the practice of hospital pharmacy.
That's really helpful. Thank you. And with that, I'd like to thank our speakers very much for being with us today. Really, really engaging. And we do hope that the attendants have found this really helpful. And we really welcome any more questions we can pick up. And I think that the slides will be shared afterwards. You can contact the speakers directly. And thank you once again, Andras, Kirsty, and Joseph for being with us today. We'll just move on to the final announcements before we end the event. Just as a reminder, in case you're not aware, the 25th of September is World Pharmacist Day. You really have to know this. And we want you to be part of our campaign. So the details are on the slide, but we just want you to be part of this campaign. And the theme this year is really all about trust. It just takes a few simple steps to create a graphic that allows you to add your voice, represent your country, and you can click on the URL available on the slide to join. So we really, really would like your participation in this. We have had hundreds and hundreds of pharmacists around the world participating, and it would be lovely to have yours as well. World Pharmacist Day is now in its 11th year of celebration, and it is an opportunity for our profession to make our vital role in improving health really, really visible around the world. Thank you. Finally, we'd just like to remind you to check all of our future FIP digital events at events.fip.org. You can pre-register to the events which are running through till the end of the year. We've had hundreds of events delivered so far, and you can also view and explore the past events as well. I'd like to thank everybody and thank the FIP staff team who have made this event successful. Mila and Ruben in the background, thank you so much. And we hope to see you